Back to Ladies Can We Talk with Debbie Georgatos on 660 AM The Answer.
This is Debbie Georgatos, and welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. As I mentioned before our break, we have a great guest tonight, Curtis Bowers. He is actually a former Idaho state representative, but he's now a documentary filmmaker. Hi, Curtis.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Love having you. I want you to tell the story, and I know I've heard you tell it other times, but tell the story how you went from an Idaho state representative to being a filmmaker. What prompted you to do the original Agenda movie, which many of us have seen, and then I want to hear about the new movie that's coming out right now. But to start with, if you would tell us why you got going making the original Agenda movie.
Well, in 2008, I was a state representative in Idaho, and I started to notice that a lot of the legislation coming through was harmful to a lot of the businesses around. I'd get called from businessmen saying, man, don't pass that. It's going to wreck my business. And it doesn't do anything to help the environment. It's just more regulation and different things. And for the first time in 16 years, I remembered back to a meeting I had attended in 1992 at the University of California, Berkeley. The Communist Party USA was splitting, and they were starting a new group called the Committees of Correspondence, which doesn't that sound wonderful? I think that was Samuel Adams' first group for freedom in America. But they were breaking off this new group, and an older gentleman who had studied communism his whole life asked me to go for him. He said, why don't you go and see what they're up to? Because again, remember in 89, the Berlin Wall came down. In December of 91, the Soviet Union dissolved. Now, this is the summer of 92. So I went to this meeting, and again, in 2008, I thought back to that meeting, and one of the key things they had said in 1992, that's 24 years ago, one of the key things they said is, we're going to use the environmental movement to destroy the evil free enterprise system in America because it is so unjust. And all of a sudden I go, wait a minute, because when they had said that in 92, I thought, how would you do that? I didn't even understand how you could use the environmental issues, because back then it was a lot of tree hugger, people chaining themselves to trees and things like that. It wasn't mainstream. How could you use that to destroy free enterprise? But of course, 16 years later, the environmental movement in 2008 was the most powerful thing in America. An Inconvenient Truth had just come out, and everyone was changing everything about everything they did based on the environment. And I realized, wait a minute, something is going on here.
You know, your title of your original film, and you refer to them as documentary films. The original was Agenda, and then this new one is Agenda 2. And you talk about the notion that the communists in the world had really been always critical of and seen America as the kind of stumbling block or the block in the road that prevented them from spreading communism around the world. So one of the premises of Agenda is that many things we think are just movements or political opinions, like environmentalism, are really part of a larger agenda to just pull America away from freedom and capitalism. Is that an accurate summary?
Yes, absolutely. The goal is America has to come down. It has to be closer to the rest of the world for anyone to accept a socialist government at a local level or a one world government. No one is going to accept that when there's one country that is tenfold above everybody else, shining like a bright light. It exposes, our success in America has exposed the failure of socialism all over the world, and they hate us for that. So they go, if we ever want to have a one world socialist government, we've got to take America down. And that's why at that meeting they talked about attacking our families. They said, the family institution's evil, and we've got to stop those parents from influencing their children. We got to do whatever we can to get the children at the earliest age possible. And they also talked about our morality. And they said, and this is 1992 again, think back, that's 24 years ago. In 1992, they said the way we will destroy the last remaining fabric of America's morality is we're going to do everything we can to get them to accept homosexuality. And look where we are today.
It is staggering, and I love thinking about that history, that 1992 meeting, because these were people who were just speaking from their hearts what they really truly wanted. These were communists in America at Berkeley talking about what their vision for America was. And you mentioned also, I think, in another interview, they really wanted to attack the free enterprise system. They wanted to make sure that that's what is obviously the root of America's liberty and prosperity. So all those things were mentioned then, and then these came to your attention in 2008 as you were a state legislator in Idaho. So then you decided to, you really made a big change in life. You kind of turned back on all the business, whatever you were doing, to move forward. So why was this so important to you to make this film?
Because I realized if we keep going the direction we're going, which is a purposeful direction, that was the main thing that hit me. America has been declining for 50 years, not by accident. It has been a purposeful change pushed by people and groups that hate everything America stands for. And I realized, you know what? God has blessed me with a wonderful wife and 9 children. And as I sat there and looked at them at the table, I realized if we keep going the direction we're going, we don't have to guess where this ends. We know exactly where it ends. We've already been there in the 20th century over and over again with National Socialism, Soviet socialism, and all these different things. And we see what happens. It's slaughter and abuse of the people every time. And I said, I got to do something to try to wake up the American people. So at least my kids will know I didn't just sit around and do nothing. And I really did it for my children to try to wake people up to the purposefulness behind what's been happening.
So your first movie, Agenda, the first one, Agenda, I want to say the full name, which is Agenda, Grinding America Down. That came out in 2012, and you were warning about the dangers looking forward to the second Obama administration. So in these, now that we are nearly through with the second Obama administration, what things you talked about in the first movie have actually happened or come to be?
Yes, actually the first movie was finished in 2010, and so he had just got things rolling. I started making the film before he was elected president, so not knowing how it was going to really accelerate the things I was studying, so much of it has. I get emails every day from people going, are you a prophet or what? And they go, everything your film is talking about is exactly what's happening. And no, I am not. It's when you can graph 2 points on a graph, you can see what direction you're heading. We are heading toward big government, and big government will always end in totalitarian government because it has to. Socialism on its own does not work. And because it doesn't work, there's a point where finally you have to start forcing people. You have to pull the guns out to force them to do the things they're not going to do since we're naturally lazy when you have a society where everyone gets paid for existing. And so that film, it's neat. It's a history of how we've gotten to where we are. And the new film, Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit, goes into the specific issues that we're facing today and how they have been cleverly crafted to pull us in with rosy and patriotic sounding terms or even Christian sounding terms, but to use us as useful idiots to continue to further their agenda of finishing this wonderful country off.
You know, what you're talking about, and I certainly agree, on this radio show many times we talked about many policies, positions, and issues the American left stands for, and they're always sold in very loving, emotional terms. If you really care about people, then you want an expansive and expanding government assistance programs. You want an expanding welfare state. But part of what happens is you cultivate a generation of people dependent and helpless, which then the government must continue to grow to collect money. It's a cycle, and I think some people are waking up a little bit to see that the left really isn't driven by compassion. It's driven by the desire to control people. But then again, President Obama was, and I'm sorry, I didn't know the correct year your first film came out, but then, so President Obama was reelected in 2012, and we've had 4 more years of his administration. We've seen the environmental movement grow astronomically, the power through the EPA and other agencies, the power they have over people. So what are people who begin to grasp this agenda, see what you're talking about, what should they do to stop it?
Well, one of the key the reasons this has happened, why America has just fallen off a cliff in so many areas, is because the radical leftists in America understood what the communists understood, whether it was Stalin or Mao or Hitler, fascist, all of them understood one thing. If you get the children, you have everything. And we allowed them to take and capture the hearts and minds of our children. And that's why all of a sudden someone like Obama could be reelected. I mean, in the 1990s, just 20 years ago, he wouldn't have got 5% of the vote. people with the way he was talking. But you give them another 20 years, because they take another 20 years of capturing the hearts and minds of the children, then they're ready. They've been told this stuff is wonderful. That's why Bernie, everyone under 35 in America is for Bernie. Why? Because they don't know what socialism is. They don't know what communism is. All they're listening to is these flowery words of marketing, something that is so destructive for the people that it's supposed to help, so enslaving for the very people it's supposed to help, so destructive to the environment, the very thing they claim to be helping. It's a complete lie, but when you're ignorant, even a lie sounds like the truth. And so we need to be first trying to capture the hearts and minds of our own children, our grandchildren. We need to do that, because if we don't start investing in the young people, this trend is going to continue to grow, where it's going to be quite staggering, the difference between the two sides that right now are about 50% and 50%.
We're talking tonight with Curtis Bowers, who is the documentary filmmaker of Agenda and his new film, Agenda 2. We have about 10 seconds. How can people find your movie?
AgendaDocumentary.com. AgendaDocumentary.com. You can watch the trailers and order the film if you're interested.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome.